The only reason you have yet to write that book, launch your podcast, or speak on stages around the world is because you've chosen not to. In this edition of Thursday's Thought, I share my personal journey of how I got featured in multiple platforms and podcasts, hosted workshops in multiple cities, produced my 3-day event, and launched a podcast within the first few years of pursuing my purpose. In this episode, you'll learn the 10 steps I took to collapse time and make all of this happen. Refuse to let yourself suffer from the pain of unfulfilled purpose. Listen to this episode and start making shit happen now. If you are a purpose-driven leader and you feel like you're ready to communicate your message with absolute conviction so you can write your book, launch your podcast, or speak on stages across the world, I invite you to join me at the Activation Retreat. This is an intimate and profoundly transformational 4-day retreat for leaders that will help you embody your mission, deepen your spiritual practice, and activate your voice and your gifts. There are only 12 seats total. If this interests you, apply today at rubyfremon.com/activation-retreat. The link will be in the show notes, or just head to my homepage and click on retreats at the top bar. Now, whether you're new to this podcast or you're a loyal podcast listener, please make sure you take a moment to download a few episodes and drop a rating and review on iTunes. Now it is time to learn how to go after what you want right now. Hey, thought leaders, when I look back on my journey over the past, about 5 years, it's been an incredible one. I started a coaching business, one that was very, very driven by purpose. I've been featured in multiple platforms. I've had my work, my article shared in some incredible platforms. I've spoken on stages around the world. I've created, produced, and ran my own 3-day event with upwards of 100 people in attendance at any time. I've hosted my workshops in different cities around Canada and the US. I've launched a podcast. There's been so much that I have achieved in what most people consider to be such a short amount of time. And I kind of disagree with that statement and agree with it. I think that, yes, it can seem like a short amount of time to someone who hasn't achieved this much in the amount of time that I've done it. And yet to me, it seems like the right amount of time. Because when we look at time as a linear thing, which is how we're taught to look at time, we feel like we have to follow this certain path in order to get what we want. But we have the power to collapse time. Like, we have the power to collapse time and get what we want sooner. We have the power to create things so they happen sooner than later. We don't have to wait. There's no order of things. Like, we don't have to follow a certain path. And for you, the thought leader with big dreams, you want to be featured in platforms. You want to speak on stages all over the world. You want to launch your podcast, write your book, launch your retreats around the world, whatever it is that you want to do. How long are you willing to wait until that happens? And this wait is painful, right? This is what I call the pain of unfulfilled purpose. So you have a pain of unfulfilled purpose. And how long are you willing to sit in that? So let's backtrack a little bit, because I believe that the majority of us thought leaders go through a very, very similar arc in our storylines. And it's the pain to power story. We all go through this pain to power story. We once lived in pain and now we feel empowered, right? For me, it was overcoming a life where I felt like I was a victim to my depression, to my anxiety. I was an addict. I was in a cycle of toxic and abusive relationships. I had toxic friendships. I did everything and anything to numb out. And I felt my entire life that I didn't have a voice. I felt like I was always told to be a certain way, to live in the confinements of a box. And the Ruby you know now, the Ruby that you're listening to today, is totally different, right? I'm speaking on stages, sharing my story. I'm talking about whatever the fuck I want to talk about on this podcast. I am constantly pushing my edges and my limits and putting myself out there in a way to be seen for the sake of my purpose and for my mission. See, when you have a pain to power journey, which you do because you're listening to this, when you have a pain to power journey, that leads you not just to that state of empowerment, but to the realization of your purpose. And maybe you've already experienced this, right? You get to the pain, from the pain to the power. You realize that that journey within itself holds your purpose. And your purpose is to support other people who are just like you to get to where you're at now. I mean, this is a very, very common arc for us thought leaders. And I think it's easy to come to that realization. It's easy to come to that realization of what your purpose truly is after you go through the pain to power journey. But what's difficult is actually taking some real action on that purpose, is doing something with it. That's difficult. And that's where a lot of people get stuck. I think also a lot of you are playing small in that arena. You know, if you've been going at it for a few years, there's no reason why you shouldn't be featured in other platforms. There's no reason why you couldn't have launched that podcast or spoken on stages around the world or created those programs or run those retreats. Like, there's no reason why other than you chose not to do it. And notice how I said chose, because I want you to realize that this is a conscious decision that you get to make. It's a conscious choice that you get to make, and one that you get to make despite what your unconscious mind is telling you. So if your unconscious mind is telling you you can't do this because you don't know enough, or you're not worthy of success, or what are people going to think, and I'm too scared. If you listen to those things, then of course you're not going to go out and do the things that you really want to do or go after your dreams. You might be playing somewhat medium sized. I'm not going to say big. You know, you might be doing some things, but you realize that you're actually playing a lot smaller than you can. And within that realization of playing small, when you realize you're playing small, that also gives you a choice, right? You can choose to continue playing small, or you can choose to do something different and go after what it is that you really want. So for me, my journey, I really didn't start working as a coach until the very end of 2014. I think I took maybe like 2 coaching calls in December 2014, and 2015 is like really when I kicked gears. Started my coaching business. Within the first 4 months of 2015, went full time. And by the end of 2015, I had already been featured in Mind Body Green, in Huffington Post. I had already created a YouTube channel with 1,000 followers. And then by 2016, I had my first speaking gig. I was already hosting workshops everywhere, New York, LA, Vancouver. And 2017 is when I launched my 3-day event, which I did for 3 years. 2018 is when I launched my podcast. I mean, I've been creating a lot for my purpose, and really to help serve those that I'm meant to serve, that I know I'm here to serve, because I'm taking my pain to power journey and that realization of my purpose, and I'm putting it into action despite my old programming, despite my beliefs and my fears, because I'm still scared every day. I think people ask me that on Instagram when I do Q&As. They'll ask, do you ever still feel fear? And my answer is, yeah, I do. I feel fear a lot. I feel a lot of fear. I experience fear almost daily with my business. And I see that as a good thing, because I see that that means that I'm challenging myself. You know, everything that I've accomplished, producing and hosting a 3-day event, like that shit's scary. Creating a podcast, that's scary. Speaking on stages across the world, that's scary. It's scary putting ourselves out there to be seen, to be judged, to be ridiculed, whatever it is, whatever your fear is, it's scary, right? But you have to understand that you can continue to listen to your fears, or you can let your purpose be your driving force. And that's what I chose to do. Because for me, the pain of my purpose being unfulfilled weighs more heavily than the pain of coming face to face with a fear. And I can guarantee that that is going to be the same for you. But the reason the fear feels bigger in the moment is because in that moment, you're forgetting about the purpose. You're just fixated on the fear. So the fear feels amplified, and it causes you to freeze, to not take action, to not do anything. But if you really think about it, and in those moments, if you're able to shift your mind back on your purpose, why you're doing what you're doing. And could you imagine having gone through your entire story, your entire journey, your pain to power journey, all the shit that you've been through, to realize your purpose and then not do anything with it? Like, imagine that. Imagine that pain of your unfulfilled purpose. That thing that is supposed to be the thing that gets you out of bed every day is now the thing that weighs heavily and keeps you in bed. See, for me, that wasn't a choice. I didn't want that to be a choice. I saw it as no choice because I am deciding that I'm going to go after my purpose no matter what. Because I am here to see it be fulfilled. I am here to create this beautiful journey from pain to power and power to purpose that just seems to make my life make sense. And that's how you get to position it within yourself. I really wanted to offer you something practical in this episode, because I know from all the feedback that you guys love it when I give you steps. Because I know it's so much easier to say, hey, just go after it. Like, just go after your dreams, focus on your purpose. Like, I get that can be overwhelming in itself. And so I want to provide you with some steps. So what I did was I reflected back on my journey over the past few years and really dug into it. Like, what really helped me take the action that I need to take to get featured, to launch a podcast, to run my 3-day event, to speak on stages across the world? Like, what did I really do there? So I'm going to share with you 10 steps. I've broken it down into 10 steps. If you're sitting down, you're able to write them down, I highly recommend that you write them down. So let's dive in. So step number 1 is declaring your purpose and owning it. I think a lot of people go through their pain to power journey, and then they realize that they have a purpose and they try and go after this ambiguous purpose, but they haven't actually really truly declared it and owned it. They haven't really taken the time to put it into words and to take ownership for it. Like, this is the purpose that has come out of my pain to power journey. And so step 1 is really declaring your purpose and owning it. So writing it out in your journal and taking ownership for what that is. Without that ownership, you're not going to know what you're actually running towards. And that leads us to step 2, which is recognize what you're running towards, not what you're running away from. From my work with hundreds of clients, I've noticed that so many people get caught up in running away. They no longer want to feel pain, so they run away from pain. They no longer want to feel like they don't have a voice, so they run away from experiences that make them feel that way. They no longer want to feel used or abused or sad or upset or depressed, and so they run away from that. But they don't really even understand what they're running towards. And if you're running away from something, but you don't know what you're running towards, that is the fastest track to getting what you don't want. You're just going to end up feeling like you're stuck in a loop, continuing to experience more of what you don't want. And maybe that sounds familiar. This is what happens when you're busy or fixated, running away from things versus running towards things. So recognize what it is that you're running towards. Step number one is declare your purpose and own it. So declare the purpose, write it out, and then recognize what you're running towards. So that could be like the vision. What does your purpose actually look like? Paint the picture. Step number three is to write clear goals. And trust me, this is something that I've had to train myself to do. I find it so much easier to just be a visionary and have this vision and not create these clear, concrete, concise goals for myself. But when we do create these clear goals, it becomes so much easier to go after what we want because we understand what the end goal is. If you want to, for example, launch a podcast, that's your goal, right? If you want to host retreats around the world, that's your goal. Get clear on that. Create clear goals. What do you want? What do you want to achieve? Step number 4, and this is super important, is to get support. Hire a coach or a mentor who really sees you, who understands your vision, and who is willing to walk that journey with you, call you out on your bullshit, raise you to a higher level. I would not have achieved all that I achieved in such a short amount of time had I not had coaches and mentors by my side. And I can say that to you with full certainty. Like, I have full conviction. I couldn't have just done that alone. There's something that one of my mentors says that always sticks in my mind. And it's, if you had the ability to do it alone, you would have already done it. Think about that right now. Maybe it's the retreat that you want to launch or speaking on stages across the world. If you had the ability to do it alone, like, you would have done it already, right? So if you haven't done it already and yet you really want to do it, get support to make it happen. Hire a coach, hire a mentor, someone who believes in you and your capacity to get it done, someone who's going to raise you to a new level, someone who's going to guide you and call you out on your blind spots. Step number 5 is to take daily courageous action. And yes, despite your fears. Okay. So we're going to feel fear no matter what. Like, I've said this time and time again on the podcast. Our goal isn't to get rid of our fears. Our goal isn't not to become fearless. Our goal is to become really great at navigating through our fears no matter what. So this is something that I really also had to learn, is taking daily courageous action. I used to be someone who was very, very scared of everything. I was scared of everything because I was scared of what would happen if I did it wrong, or what would people say, or what if I failed, and so that those fears in itself would prevent me from taking action towards what I want. And when I started coaching, when I realized my purpose, I realized how important it was to me. And I use that to drive myself to take daily courageous action. And I say courageous because I'm not talking about like little actionable steps that don't scare you. I mean, like, take the action steps that scare you. Do the things that scare you. Lean into your fear and take action towards what you want. Otherwise, you're just going to stay exactly where you're at and experience that pain of your purpose unfulfilled. Step number 6, and this is a big one. This was a big one for me, is let yourself be seen. So in my first real year being a coach in 2015, I did all the things. Like, I started doing videos. I started my own Facebook group, which I grew organically to over 5,000 people. I put myself out there time and time again to let myself be seen for the work that I was doing. I started a YouTube channel. I didn't know how to use YouTube. I didn't know how to create videos. I didn't know how to edit videos. I just basically took my laptop, started recording from my laptop camera on the foot of our guest bedroom bed, and just started doing videos, right? Like, I just started doing it because that was something that I really wanted to do. And we really have to lean into our courage, especially when our fears are telling us, or our beliefs are telling us, it has to be perfect. in order for people to take me seriously, or, oh, yeah, in order to be seen as an expert, it has to be perfectly produced and edited. No, you don't need any of that. I grew my Facebook channel to over 1,000 people quickly from doing my own edits and recording my own videos from my laptop. Okay. So take daily courageous action despite your fears. Number 6 is let yourself be seen. Or sorry, I just did that. Let yourself be seen. Letting yourself be seen. The reason why I said courageous and I made that mistake is because being seen does actually take courage. And I want to address that. I think it's really easy to be visible. It's really easy to keep putting yourself out there. And what's hard is to put yourself out there in a way where you're being seen. To create YouTube videos where you're showing your real self, where you're showing your vulnerable side, where you're like talking about your mission and your purpose and what you're here to do, versus saying all the things that you think you need to say in order to get followers. So number 6, let yourself be seen. Now, number 7, be persistent and resilient. Okay. So this is the idea of keep going after what you want despite what happens. So I remember submitting my articles to tons of different platforms. I remember being rejected by Elephant Journal probably 3 times, but I didn't give up. I started taking that article that I wrote for them and started submitting it to other platforms like Mind Body Green. And guess what? I got featured in Mind Body Green. And when I say featured, I mean my article went up and they featured it. So that happened there. It also happened in Huffington Post, where I was featured. I was interviewed and was featured and named an inspirational woman. And I also had my article go viral. It was featured by Huffington Post. So these things happened because I continued to be persistent and resilient. When things didn't work out, when I was rejected, when people weren't interested in my articles or into my ideas or anything, when things just didn't happen right away, I continued to flex my persistent muscles. And if I failed, I would get back up and keep going. And that's resiliency. We all have this in us, and we all have such an infinite connection to our persistence and our resilience. And the more that you lean into these, I call them superpowers, the more active they become. Okay. So be persistent and resilient. Number 8 is, and this is crucial. This has served me so well. Number 8 is create genuine connections and nurture those relationships. And I emphasize the word genuine. Okay. This isn't about going to a ton of networking events and swapping business cards and then putting those business cards in your electronic Rolodex, or if you're old school, a physical Rolodex. That's not what this is about. This is about creating genuine connections with people. So don't think the masses. You're not trying to connect with as many people as possible. You're trying to connect with the right people that you would really want to see in your inner circle, people who see you, who respect you, who honor you, and you do that for them as well. You respect them, you honor them, you see them, and then nurture those relationships. Like really take time to get to know them, to support one another, to be there for each other, because it's the power of relationships is so strong, and it's really easy to let those things go just because we're lazy or just because we don't put enough attention to it. And your connections, I mean, we've all heard the saying, you're only one connection away from what you want. It's so true. You know, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to speak on stage, on an epic stage in Bali, had I not created a genuine connection with my friend Joel Brown. We connected very early on, like in 2016, and we nurtured that relationship. You know, we met up for lunch. We have phone calls. We keep in touch via WhatsApp, even though he's on the other side of the world. We support each other's missions. We support each other's work, and we both put in that effort to make that happen. So I would have never had been asked to speak on his stage. And again, it was an epic stage at his Elevate event if that relationship hadn't been nurtured. And then from there, I wouldn't have connected then to my now brother, friend, mentor, Gerard Adams. You know, I got that opportunity because I got the opportunity through Joel Brown, because I had the relationship with Joel Brown. And I could tell you 101 different stories like this. But really the bottom line is you have to take responsibility for these relationships. If you're sitting there complaining, well, I don't know any cool people, or I don't know any, I don't know these people that are going to help me get to where I want to get. Well, sure, I didn't know these people before either, but I took a genuine interest in them, and I took the time to create a genuine connection and nurture those relationships, because you never know what's going to happen in the future. And so if you're constantly trying to be friends with people just for what you think they can do for them, that's not going to actually nurture the relationship. You want to be friends with people. You want to create those relationships from a genuine place, from a place of, I'm here to support you and I know you're here to support me. That's it. Okay. So create those genuine connections and nurture those relationships. And if you need help in doing that, like maybe create a list of like 10 people that you have in your circle right now, or maybe they're friends of friends that you would really love to actually create a genuine connection with and nurture that relationship. Create that list and then start getting on those calls. Like start asking them to go on juice dates or go for coffee or go for lunch, or if they don't live in the same place, go on a Zoom call. Like just do what you can to nurture those relationships. Number 9 is ask for what you want. This sounds so simple, but if it were that simple, we'd all be doing it, right? I wasn't doing this for a long time, asking for what I want, because I was so scared. I was so scared of being rejected. Can I speak on your stage? No. Okay. Then you go through that pain of rejection, right? But at the same time, that pain of rejection is temporary and it goes away. And you have to remember that. So is the temporary pain of a rejection really worth you not actually putting the ask out? So if there's a stage that you want to speak on, ask for it. If there's a podcast that you want to be featured in, ask for it. And when I say ask for what you want, also do so with some respect to who you're asking, right? So if you're trying to get on someone's podcast, like actually listen to the podcast, right? Get to know what it is that you're trying to get on. If you're asking to speak on a stage, like get to know the person who's putting out the event and what the purpose of the event is and who the event is for. Like show some genuine interest when you're asking for what you want. But definitely ask for what you want. Don't wait for things to always come to you. And then finally, number 10 is be committed. So it was like I was sharing with you before, after going through this pain to power journey and I realized my purpose, there was this pain of having a purpose that was unfulfilled. And I didn't want that. I didn't want to experience that pain. What I wanted to experience instead was the purpose being fulfilled. I wanted to feel the joy and the energy that would come from that. I wanted to feel the ripple effect of the impact that I was creating. That was important to me. And because that was important to me, I created this commitment to my growth. And when I say growth, I mean it's to your growth, your personal growth, your professional growth. It's a commitment to your goals. It's a commitment to your daily courageous action steps. It's a commitment to your gifts and a commitment to your purpose. You have to be committed in order to achieve all the things that you want to achieve. Okay. So when it comes to all those dreams that you have in your back pocket, I call them the back pocket dreams, writing the book, launching the podcast, speaking on stages around the world, hosting your retreat, being featured. When it comes to all these things, what I want you to recognize is that you have the power to make them happen. And you also have the power to make them happen now versus 10 years from now. You have that power. And I've seen it happen time and time again with my clients. I've seen them go from wishing they could speak to an audience on stage to actually speaking to an audience on stage at an event that they created to hundreds of people. Like I have seen this. This is what everyone is capable of doing. And so try out those steps. Try it out. Like give it a solid go. Okay. And shift that pain that you're feeling from your purpose unfulfilled into the pride and the joy from actually going after fulfilling your purpose. This is so much more than just applying strategy. This is about you being who you need to be to get this done. This is about you getting clear on what it is that you want and then getting clear on what you need to do to get it. So I hope that these 10 steps help. This is really what I did to get featured in countless platforms, to start my podcast, to host my retreats, to hosting my events, to my workshops. Like, this is what I've done. So I know it works. So I want you to put it to the test, try it out. Let me know how it goes. Fill me in. Just reach out to me via social media at I am Ruby. Let me know that you tried this out. Let me know what your thoughts are on it. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining me on another edition of Thursday's Thought, on today's Thought Leader, where I'm challenging you to rise up, speak up, and create a movement. If you are a leader who is ready, like really ready to communicate your message with absolute conviction, so you can write your book, launch your podcast, or speak on stages around the world, I am inviting you to join me at the Activation Retreat this September. This is an intimate and profoundly transformational 4-day retreat for leaders that will help you embody your mission, deepen your spiritual practice, and activate your voice and your gifts. There are only 12 seats total. So when I say intimate, I mean intimate. If this interests you, go to rubyfremon.com/activation-retreat and apply today. As for the podcast, thank you for being here. Be sure to download a few episodes, drop a rating and review on iTunes, help me make the charts. And if you have any questions, again, please just reach out. My handle is at I am Ruby. Thank you so much, and check back in on Monday for a brand new episode of today's Thought Leader.